queries about making the perfect tempura seem to have escalated to near mystical proportions, with much being spoken and written about the ingredients used, including the addition of baking powder or corn flour, or even using carbonated water. At the end of the day, though, there are only 3 important factors you need to consider to make a really good tempura. Firstly, the preparation of the solid ingredients. Secondly, the correct frying temperature. And lastly, the consistency and temperature of the batter. I'm Florence Sanderman, publisher of recipesforus.co.uk, and in this video I'm going to show and tell you how to make perfect tempura easily, quickly, and with ingredients that you will already have in your store cupboards or fridge. The first thing you need to do when making tempura is to deal with the solid ingredients. And you should do this before you even think about making the batter or heating the oil, because they all need to be cut into pieces which will cook very quickly, i.e. in under 2 minutes. Dealing with vegetables first, and the size you cut these to will depend on the actual vegetable. Soft vegetables such as aubergines or eggplants and courgettes or zucchini can be cut up to ½ an inch thick because they cook relatively quickly. Items such as broccoli and cauliflower should be cut into quite small florets so that there's not too thick a stem. Things like spring onions or even whole asparagus or green beans, they can be left whole if they're quite small. However, things like sweet potatoes and carrots, they're actually very dense and take much longer to cook. So these are best cut no more than 6 millimeters, that's ½ an inch thick. Do try to vary the shapes a little that you cut. I could have cut these courgettes just straight across into rounds, but I have a round sweet potato and I have a semicircle of aubergines, so cutting these into long strips will just create a more interesting finish once it's plated up. When it comes to seafood, I would mention only use raw seafood, because even that short cooking time would be enough to make already cooked seafood go really tough. Squid can be either cut into rings or, as these ones are very small, just sliced open. When it comes to the prawns, you can use them whole so long as they're not too large, but they will need to be peeled, and butterflying them actually creates a really nice effect. The heads should be removed and then peel them, but leave the tail fin intact. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, it actually looks very nice when you serve it. And secondly, it makes handling it when placing in the oil a lot easier. And then remove the intestines. Make sure that all your ingredients are very dry, otherwise the batter won't stick to them. Now, some people likely flour ingredients, but I just use kitchen paper and just make sure that everything is dry on all sides. Don't use any fancy oil, just ordinary sunflower, corn oil, any vegetable oil will do. You need a good depth in a pan. In a normal saucepan, I would say probably at least 10 centimetres, 4 inches. In a wok, it can be slightly more shallow. But do try and choose a pan that's quite wide, because when the pieces are being cooked, they tend to float around and you need to keep them separate. I'll be showing you how to tell when the temperature is correct in a little while. The most important thing is to have very cold, ice cold water. To serve for, about 210 mils, that's 7 fluid ounces. 1 egg, which you just crack into the water. And whisk it in. And then you'll need 100 grams, 4 ounces of ordinary plain wheat flour. I've added some salt to this, just half a teaspoon or so. Now, before I add this to the flour in the bowl, I'm just going to pop in a couple of ice cubes. You can use either chopsticks or a knife. You could use a fork, but a knife is perfectly good. Just pour the whole of that in and then stir it very quickly. You're not aiming for a smooth batter. In fact, you want little lumps of flour to be left. But when most of the lumps have gone, your batter's ready. The ice just ensures that the batter stays cold so that the gluten isn't overworked. Otherwise you end up with a stodgy batter which isn't light and crisp. And there we have it. As you can see, there are still lumps in the batter, and that's exactly what you want. And that took me all of 2 minutes. First of all, as I mentioned, I was going to tell you how to tell whether your oil is hot enough. Take just a little bit of the batter and drop it in. If it sinks briefly and comes back up straight away, then your oil is at the right temperature. If it sinks and stays at the bottom for any length of time, then the oil is not hot enough and you'll end up with very oily tempura. If it skips across the surface without really sinking at all, then the oil is far too hot and you need to remove it from the heat and let it cool down a little. So I'll just show you a couple of pieces of the seafood, and here's where it comes in handy. Remember, I left the tail fin on. I'm going to hold it by the tail fin, dip into the batter, shake the excess off, and then into my pan. And that makes it so easy. Excess off, into the pan. Make sure, once again, that they're well apart, and you can see the tail fins have gone pink, and that's a sign that shellfish is cooked when it turns pink. So now I'm just going to wait for the batter to brown a little before removing them onto kitchen paper. But I'm doing this in real time just so you see how quick it is. There we have it, they're golden brown, so they can be removed. Light, crisp Japanese tempura. Excellent served with a warm oriental dipping sauce.